Hello, everyone, and welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Before we begin, a quick update on Bill C-21. For those of you who are not aware, the Canadian government introduced a bill in the House of Commons, which is the main Canadian legislative body where our politicians introduce and vote on new laws, which would severely impact airsoft in Canada. You likely heard about this, though, because it made big headlines with airsoft YouTubers, including Novrich, Airsoftology, and a few other big names. As it stands right now, airsoft is still not banned in Canada and likely won't be for a while yet. Currently, the bill is in the second stage of reading, which means that it's being debated in the House. Motions or amendments can be proposed to it, and once all of that is done, it can be voted to the next stage, called the committee stage. Now, I recognize this is not a course on the Canadian democratic process, so I'll keep this brief, but essentially, if it's voted to the committee stage, a committee will review the bill for a number of factors, including witness hearings. The committee will then report back to the House of Commons, where it will be voted on again. If it passes that stage, it gets sent to the Senate, our higher legislative body, for a similar review before being voted on and being passed into law. It's worth noting that the houses do break for the summer, which will happen in less than 3 weeks, and if an election is called at any point during the process before it's passed into law, the bill dies on the paper. So yeah, there's a while to go for sure. Airsoft is still just fine in Canada at this time, but we're all working very hard, speaking to our elected officials and making sure that we get our voices heard and that Airsoft's future in Canada is protected for years to come.
And it seems very likely that we're, at time of recording, going to get, at minimum, to have a full Airsoft season this year without any real changes occurring. And then we may face some changes after that. But, I don't know, I feel optimistic. I feel like things are looking up.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. All right, so with that out of the way, on with the show. So one question that we get asked a lot, both in person and on our YouTube and in the Discord, is, I don't have a team. How do I coordinate with other random players? Or equally, how do I start my own team? And the reality is that it can both be easier said than done, but also pretty straightforward. We started the Storm Riders back in 2009, and at that time, there were only 3 of us. It was Pat, myself, and Cal. Since then, we've obviously grown as a group. Some people have left the team as well. And ultimately, we've ended up consistently, I would say, with a bunch of guys who work really well together on the field without having to force anything to work. But how that happens is not really as straightforward as many might think. So what I thought we would do today is have a conversation about those questions, right? So how do you work with other random people who you may or may not know? And how do you eventually create a team, right? And what is the approach you should take and the things you should look for and so on and so forth. And I think the place that I want to start really is just by recognizing that I've been very fortunate in that Pat and I have been friends for, as we said before, as long as either of us have been really conscious as humans, right? Pat and I have been in each other's lives since we were very, very young children. And I'm very fortunate, and I'm sure he feels the same way, that we both share this hobby.
Absolutely. I mean, it, is another facet of a really long-standing friendship, but it's a super enjoyable facet of it. And, I mean, frankly, we're both loving the fact that it gives us an excuse to hang out and have a chat every week in literally this context, right? We have a chat with each other and with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. But want to recognize that that's not the case for everyone. You might not have any friends who are interested in playing Airsoft. And the reality is you can't force anybody to play Airsoft. I think over the years, we've had several of our friends come out and, just do a skirmish in a random game and all this kind of stuff. But really, it's not something that we're ultimately very interested in, right? So that's fine. But you also don't want to get into this position where you're trying to force your friends to play Airsoft either, right? So I just wanted to highlight that because our situation is, I wouldn't say unique, but it's certainly special, right? You may not be in the same situation that we are, that you have, one of your good friends who you can just go and say, hey, let's play together and start a team.
And, it's worth noting also that it took me a couple of years to sort of decide that I wanted to check this out and get into it. You know, not just because of it being sort of a different hobby for me initially, but because I didn't know that much about what Phil was doing other than that he was posting pictures of himself in camo with a gun.
And it was expensive at the time, too,
Well, yeah,
which
totally.
is another big thing.
And I was a poor student.
Yeah.
Which never helps with expensive hobbies, you know. But yeah, I think it's definitely a thing where pitching this to your friends who might be interested is a really good idea. You know, but like being too aggressive about it probably isn't.
Yeah. Right. So if your question is like, how do I make my friends play Airsoft with me? You're probably taking that from the wrong angle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like convincing people to try it, sure. But like, you have to do this with me, not so much.
So then the thing that's interesting is when you look at the Storm Riders now, aside from you and I, all the people on the team are not people we knew outside of the context of Airsoft. We met every single one of those individuals by playing Airsoft.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I mean, that's really cool. It's provided me with a lot of friendships that I might not otherwise have had. You know, there's some guys on our team who are, as it turns out, by luck of the draw, also big old nerds. And, you know, who are into the nerdy hobbies that we both enjoy that aren't Airsoft, but certainly not everyone. And that's fine. And in fact, I would say it's awesome. It's good. Airsoft has sort of provided me with a place where I meet people who are not as academic as I am, right? I spent way too much time at university. My circle of friends largely, I think, shows that. But that isn't always, you know, good. It means that we don't have perspectives on as many things as we might want, right?
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
And so, like, talking to Chris, who is, you know, an engineer, gets me a lot more practical solutions to problems than, like, several people I know. And just, it results in having different perspectives. And like, I hope that my perspective has been maybe helpful to someone in our crew at some point, God knows. But, you know, they've definitely been helpful to me. I've learned a lot from a group of people who I otherwise probably would never have met many of.
Yeah, I definitely have had that conversation with you and with Chris and with others in the past. But these, you know, people who are on our team are not people who normally I really would have bumped elbows with, right? Either because their big thing is playing team sports and I was really never into team sports, right? Or like Chris, you know, this is an engineer and they're more on the engineering and like practical, like, you know, either trade side of things. And you're really not people who I would engage with a whole lot. And not by any sort of malice. It's just not the kind of circles that we would run in.
Yeah, it turns out even in as small a place as St. John's, there are loads and loads of people you're never really going to meet or have a reason to sit down and have a couple of beers with, right?
Yeah, totally. So the thing that's the thing that's worth noting then is that the people who are on our team at some point were just another random player, right? So you think about, you go to an Airsoft, it's like, you go to an Airsoft game and you're like, how do I play with random people? Well, eventually you play enough with them and maybe those are people who you share stuff in common with and you want to create a team. So the first part of the questions that we get asked a lot is how can you coordinate? How can you work with people who you don't really know?
I suggest yelling.
Yeah. I suggest not listening to Pat in that particular instance.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, it's, you know, we've talked about this in previous episodes, but like yelling at people to do stuff on the field, especially if they don't know you, is not an effective way to get stuff on.
I just meant yelling hello and like flailing your arms while you run at them in a genuinely greeting fashion.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. But yeah, so how do you interact and how do you get the most out of your interactions with random players on the field? And one of the things that, if you're looking to build and foster those relationships with people, the first thing you need to do is you got to be approachable.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, being less silly, I would say, you know, be polite, be friendly and open and inviting and be assertive, you know, like not in a like, grr, do what I say way, but just in a, you know, like, let's try this.
Yeah.
Right. Be positive. And I'm sure people who are listening to this who are, you know, local airsofters are going to laugh at that because I'm an intimidating guy at 8:30 in the morning on a Saturday, largely because I haven't had coffee and am not yet awake. So when you say, hey, Pat, how's it going? I go, and that's among my people. That is a greeting at that time of day.
So, I mean, there's certainly some specific things that you can do to make yourself more approachable, right? One of the specific things that we did and there was a conscious thing that we did as a team, is we put our names on our plate carriers or chest rigs or whatever. Because by putting your name on your chest rig or your plate carrier, it makes it easier for people to approach you because they know who you are, right? They don't even have to ask. When you think about interactions with people, just the simple act of going, hey, my name is Phil, what's your name, is very strange for lots of people, right? Especially at the airsoft field. You'll have conversations with people, and I can guarantee you many of you feel this, have felt this before. You will have full-on conversations with people who you don't even know their name. You have this thing in common. You'll be like, oh man, it was so great. Like, you shot me, and then we had this really awesome interaction. Oh, you threw the grenade and it didn't go off, but I was scared. Like, way to go. You fist bumped them, all this kind of stuff. And you have no idea who that person is, or you don't know their name.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with that in terms of, sharing good vibes after a game is always to be encouraged. But if you're hoping to try to, get more ongoing interaction where you work with other people regularly and maybe eventually end up working with them as a formalized team in some way, having a name tape is a great idea. Because, hey, they'll at least know who you are.
Yeah, that's right. It makes it easy. You're opening the door, right? You're saying, here's my name. If you want to use it, it's there for you.
And it's especially good for people like me who are awful with names because they don't have that, like, oh, God, I don't remember his name. Who is this guy again? Mm-hmm. It's just, oh, yeah, right. There, it's literally right there. Look at that.
Yeah.
And it means that people can, rather than approaching and being like, hey, I'm so-and-so, what's your name? Can just look at you and go, oh, Warren, what up? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or if you're Phil, you can watch them trying to pronounce.
Yes. Yeah.
But,
well, I mean, hey, it is what it is.
I may have a terrible sense of humor, as you know. And I think that, yeah, just that aspect of being approachable is really important. And there are other ways you can accomplish it, right? So think about your body language. Think about how you are standing when you're just sort of chilling, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're standing and you have your arms crossed and you're like, people are not necessarily going to feel you're approachable. And that, believe it or not, does matter in terms of meeting people and having a chat with them. And one of the things I think is probably super important, perhaps even the most important thing about our approach to gathering our team, was that everyone on our team really was selected not because we're like, oh my God, this is the best airsoft player we've seen in however long an amount of time, but because we had a chat during, breaks between games and stuff, and we're like, this is someone I want to have a burger and a beer with. That's probably a cool person to add to our team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing about being approachable is that, you want to be the kind of person that people want to approach. So if you think about other people at your field, guaranteed there are certain people who you look at and you're like, I don't really care, what that guy has to say because he's always doing this or doing that, right? So if someone on your field is a whiner, for example, you will probably not want to go hang out with that person because that's not really an attitude that you sort of look up to, right? If someone is always very down or negative or like, oh, I don't want to do that, that's stupid, or is, in some ways even disrespectful or anything like that, those are people who you don't really care about and they're not people who you want to get to know. And so the reverse is also true, right? If you are the person who's always whining or complaining about how things are too difficult or you don't want to do certain things or you're belly aching and stuff, that will put people off from wanting to talk to you as well. So you need to make sure that, and I'm not talking about being fake here and not being someone that you're not, but you need to be, conscious of how you come across to other people as well, right? So if, if the ref, for example, says, oh, this is what I want you to do, and you go, oh my God, I can't believe it, blah, blah, blah. People are like, wow, get a load of this guy. That sucks, right? Whereas if you're affable about it, it's a different story.
Yeah. I mean, a little positivity goes a long way, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm a big daunting looking dude if you don't know me, right? Put me in camo and my lack of coffee and I'm a surly, scary looking guy at 8 a.m., right? Mm-hmm. But, I genuinely will respond to almost every game type at anywhere we play with. Yeah, let's do it, right?
Yeah.
Because, at worst, they're still fun, right? The least fun time I have playing Airsoft is still a good time, almost always, right? There's the occasion oh, I got shot in the ear. I'm just going to be over here cursing for a few minutes. But barring stuff like that, Airsoft is fun. That's why I'm there. That's why I'm doing it. So I should theoretically be in a good mood. And if I'm not in a good mood, then I need to assess that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But, it's not about sort of fronting. It's not about, fabricating a new personality or a new persona for yourself. Like, there's nothing wrong with the fact that I'm often quiet, right? Just with the fact that, people might perceive me as standoffish because of it. And so I take steps to address that, right?
Yeah.
In my case, one of the big things is I know a lot about gun teching, and people are always asking questions at games about gun teching. So I just participate in those conversations, and I try to be helpful and genuine and friendly, and I think every second game I attend, a kid's gun falls apart in some weird way. And I'm just like, yeah, you need that screw there, and that both helps to make me seem approachable and build sort of a positive reputation for my team, in the sense that people are like, oh, Pat's one of these guys, probably because he's a big friendly dude. They are all big friendly dudes, even though they might look intimidating because they're a bunch of dudes standing around camo with guns.
Yeah.
And like I think it's not a thing you should undersell, right? Like, people who are new to this sport, who are showing up for the first time or the first couple of times, are going to look at veteran players as daunting. They're not necessarily going to be used to being in, a big room or field or wherever with 20 guys in camo with assault rifle looking things. And the net effect is, yeah, you're better off being friendly, right? And if you have new people showing up, especially if you're trying to, connect with people and like figure out, I'd like to have a fire team to work with just for today or for the next week or whatever, approach people, right? Mm-hmm. It's this thing where, I definitely understand the difficulty of approaching people at times, right? It can be daunting. It's the sort of thing that, does make some people, myself included, often nervous.
Yeah.
But as a person who's trying to organize a group or trying to get a group on the go, you really need to be willing to step up.
Yeah.
Right? So if you want to have a group of players to play with for today, or, you're hoping to maybe form a team in the future and you're just like trying to get to know everyone, which is really the first and most critical step, you're going to have to step out and say, hey, I'm looking for some guys to be a fire team for this next, game. Right, we're playing a team deathmatch. Who wants to play the team deathmatch with me as like work together and do like the buddy pair thing? Just say that, and you'll almost always get someone who's like, sure, man.
Yeah, it also works the other way too. Like if you're playing at a game and you see that there are certain people organizing and stuff, right, and you're sort of on the outside looking into that, you can absolutely sort of take a step and say, hey guys, I'm looking to buddy up with someone. Could I join you? And how can I help? There's a huge part here around. So obviously, if you're taking the initiative to say like, I want to, you come with me, like let's do something together, or whatever. That's one thing. But if you want to insert yourself into a group of people, that can be a bit more challenging. And so the first thing that you need to do in situations like that is show that you're willing to work. Right? Be like, guys, like what can I do? How can I help? You're not going in there trying to tell them what to do. Right? You're not challenging their authority in any way. All you're saying is, I want to assist you. How can I best do that?
Yeah. And that's, again, a super strong way of just sort of introducing yourself to a group of people and putting yourself in a position where they're looking at you positively, where they're going, this guy, has his head screwed on straight, right? Because you're not coming in and being like pushing people around or trying to assert authority or just even trying to like demonstrate knowledge, which is, I think, a big positive. One of the things that can be sort of challenging with airsoft players, I think we both experienced this, Phil, is you get people coming in and going like, oh man, I'm gonna just talk a lot about my airsoft knowledge to try to show these guys who have been playing for years that I know my stuff. And like that's cool, don't get me wrong, it's cool that people know their stuff, and like nerding out is totally a thing, but so is just talking to try to impress me, and I don't care. Like, I'd rather you be a chill, cool person than know a lot about airsoft. Because at the end of the day, I want to have fun and hang out and shoot BBs, not necessarily just, like, have you prove yourself to me. Like, no one needs to prove themselves to me.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, that's not where I am in my headspace with Airsoft. And I know that people are looking at our, our team and going, well, like, you guys are did really well at this game, or, you know, you look really professional because you've spent too much money on camo and, you know, and gear. But the reality is no one on our team is like that. You know, no one on our team is like, oh yeah, prove to me that you're legit. Like, you know how you prove to me that you're legit at Airsoft? Come play a game. Shoot me with some BBs. Shoot BBs at other people with me. Have a laugh.
Yeah.
Right? You know,
yeah, that's right.
Show me that you are here to have fun and are having fun doing this.
Yeah.
You know, and so by walking up to the group and being like, hey, how can I help? What's the plan? If there are a group of people who are obviously have a plan and going like, hey, can you guys fit me into your plan? That's going to come across much more positively than approaching the exact same people and going, I have a plan, let's follow it. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, now, I mean, also obviously, like, there's benefit to being in a group of 6 or 7 guys who are doing a team deathmatch and going, all right, does anyone have a plan? All right, no one has a plan. Let's try this.
Yeah, that's right.
You know?
And I think you just hit a really good point. Like, so firstly, if you introduce yourself to a group and you say, hey, how can I help? And they give you something to do, you make sure to do that thing, number one, right? So you have to show that sort of, not just a willingness to take up on a plan, but like do what you say you're going to do, right? So that's one thing. But Pat, you just raised a really good point, which is that if someone is discussing a plan and you have a good idea, you should feel free to raise that idea up, right? But how do you do that without necessarily challenging someone's authority? Well, the best way you can do that is by asking questions, right? So if someone says like, oh, this is what I want to do, and you could actually say, okay, just so I know, have you considered trying this? Because I found that was pretty effective. That way, if they haven't considered it, you've just given them an out to say, oh, you're right, we hadn't considered that, let's do that. As opposed to just saying, hey, that sounds dumb. Last time I did that, I got shot. Why don't we do this? That's a lot more of a direct challenge, right?
And it puts them in a position of like, you know, if they have thought of it, they can tell you why, but you haven't stepped in it, right? You haven't
that's
looked
right.
at someone and gone, well, that seems really stupid. Why would we do that? And then they go, well, we're going to do that because, you know, I know more about this field than you do, or because we have a tactical approach that will resolve the issue of you got shot in the face last time when you were by yourself, but like we have, you know, a fire team of 4 guys and can resolve that.
Or maybe just as simple as we just want to try it this time, which is also fine.
Totally.
Right? So then you can go, oh, fair enough, no problem, right? You've considered it, you're going to do something else, great, perfect, let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? I mean, you know, I and other people on our team have definitely more than once just like popped onto the comms and been like, hey, I'm going to try something dumb. So whatever happens next is my fault.
Totally. And, you know, there could be lots of reasons. Like, you know, as airsofters, we end up playing the similar fields often. It could very well be that, you know, this one time you want to do something that never really works. Maybe you think it'll work this time and you want to try it. Who knows, right? But again, if you are going into a group and you're trying to insert yourself into that group and say, like, I want to work with you guys, or, you know, how can I help, or whatever, you can't just say, oh, that's a stupid idea, because again, you're coming across in the wrong way. Like, you're not that kind of person. You're just trying to be helpful. You just want to make sure that you're, you know, respectful of people's opinions and you understand why people are trying the things that they want to try, right?
Yeah. And try to really just, you know, think before you open your mouth. As much as that might seem like obvious advice, it isn't a thing that lots of people apply, right? And, you know, including myself, like, I say dumb shit all the time. You've heard me say it on here. But it does try to, if you're trying to introduce yourself to a group of people, you know, as the saying goes, put your best foot forward, right?
Yeah.
Try to give them a good version of you. You know, because, like, you know, Phil and I have been playing this game forever, but if I show up to Frontline and there are, you know, a bunch of younger guys playing who play every week, and I'm like, oh, you know, I'm going to work with you guys today because they split me off from my team. I'm not going to be like, okay, dudes, this is the plan, because there are 5 of them and I don't know what they normally do. I'm going to go, okay, guys, you more or less have some idea of what I can do because you're usually shooting at me. Where do you want me? What can I do?
That's right.
Right? How can I integrate myself into what you've got going on? Because if you're approaching a group of people who actually do play together regularly, right? You know, like Phil and I work really well together as a fire team pair because we've done it a lot. But if we have a third guy, awesome. That's another sector we can have covered, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But we're going to respond a lot better to someone, even a really skilled player coming up and being like, hey guys, how do we work this? Rather than, hey guys, we should do this. And like, we try to keep our ego out of it, and like I said, we're not, like, oh, I'm so good at airsoft or anything. We're people. We get grumpy. And it's easier for us to interact with someone who's like, okay, what can we do together, rather than, hey, I have this plan and we should do it.
Yeah.
Right. And even if you do have a plan, if you're the person showing up going, I have a plan, it's still, what can we do together? Because your plan might not be optimal, and like 3 brains is better than 1.
And also, your plan requires everybody to do what your plan actually is. If people go, yeah, listen to this guy, and as soon as the whistle blows, they just do whatever, like that's not helpful either, right? So you need people on your side to actually execute on whatever plan. And that's the advantage of a team versus random players, is that with a team, you have that tacit sort of like acknowledgement that if we say go, that's what we're doing, and we're all aligned to that. And if you just have random people, sometimes you need to work a little bit extra to get that. But this brings us neatly into the second point, which is, so up until now, we've been talking about like, how do you sort of talk to people outside of the game, etc., and how do you get those people to work with you on what you want to do, agree on planning, etc. But how do you work with a random person on the field who you've never played with before, or maybe you have played with them a little bit before, but you don't really have any sort of time under the belt, so to speak? How do you work with those people? Well, I'll tell you, the first thing is, and this is from my personal experience, if you've said to someone that, hey, you know what, we should work together today, and they go, okay, you need to work with that person. If you've been accustomed to playing by yourself and operating as a lone sort of unit, that is going to be your natural tendency. And so very quickly, you can find that the person who you decided you were going to buddy up with, you left them behind, or they left you behind. And again, you're finding yourself on the field all by yourself, and you're not working with anyone anymore. Really, you haven't achieved what you set out to do.
And I've done that with players on our team, and so it's Phil. Like we've had games where we were like, all right, so we're going to work in a buddy pair, and then one of the 2 players sees something that's like, oh, this is a good idea, and just ducks off and starts doing it. And then the other guy goes, where'd my buddy go?
Yeah, for sure.
And often they're going like after the game, like, dude, I got shot in the back of the head because you were supposed to be watching the sector and you just wandered off. So part of it is, communicate with the other player or players who you're trying to work as a fire team with. And that's a skill. It takes practice. It is way harder than you think it is, as weird as that might sound. But it is a thing you'll also get better at by doing it.
Yeah. And so like as some concrete tips, I mean, like we'll give you some concrete tips on how to approach people and how to have conversations and stuff. Some concrete tips if you're working with someone who, is sort of foreign to you, pay attention to them. Just look at them occasionally and go, hey, dude, what do you see? What do you got? Are you good where you are? Right? Just look at, so what are you thinking? Where are we going? Right? What do you want to do here? Have you seen anybody? What's the situation? Right? Pay attention to them and get them to pay attention to you.
And I think it's important also, so keep that line of communication open, like Phil was just saying, right? Talk. And if people find out where you are because you weren't being as tactical and quiet as you'd like, it's still better. 2 guys who are communicating is way more effective than 3 or 4 guys who are not, at the end of the day, because you can watch my back and I can watch yours and we can keep that aware. Also, once, trigger pulling starts, these things are pretty loud. We know where you are. Shout. There's no benefit in being quiet from that point. Now, I mean, if you both have radios, then you can sort of keep it quieter while you're doing the moving around part before the shooting starts, which is great. The other piece of practical advice I think that I want to put forward first is, if you're trying to get together to work with you, who you don't know, you're going to have to suck up taking the shit jobs.
Yeah.
Right? So if someone has to go first and get shot, and you're the one who's trying to like make the plan and get people to like work together as a team and gel, you should be the one who goes first and gets shot.
Yep.
Maybe not
100%.
Every time, but like definitely the first few times, because it shows people that you're willing to put your face into the problem, right? And it gives you an opportunity to like laugh about the fact that you got shot, which is good sportsmanship, really. Like I talk about how like I don't care about getting shot, but yeah, I laugh that off, right? Most of the time, because that is displaying in Airsoft that, yeah, you hit me and I don't mind and I'm cool and this is fun.
Yeah, like going back to the safe zone and being like, "Oh, good thing I went first. Otherwise, you would have gotten lit up." Right?
Yeah.
Just it's a fun way to sort of just deal with that.
Exactly. And like, we have had plans, not very often, but we've had plans where, part of the plan is Pat goes that way loudly and gets shot a bunch. Usually.
Or usually shot at.
Well, both.
We don't set it out for you to get shot. It just happens.
Well, yes, I was about to say, I'm the one who's stating the plan when involved and get shot a bunch. It's me and, when he played more regularly, Jeremy and I, all right, you guys are the loud ones. Go draw fire. And weirdly, that was pretty effective, because when 15 of the enemy team start going after 2 guys, the rest of your team can do surprisingly useful things, let me tell you. The key piece there is, you have to be willing to get up and go and take risks, right? We've all had that new player who's like hiding in cover and like they're glued to it. They're super stressed about getting shot because they're new to this and it hurts and they haven't just gotten accustomed to walking it off, right? Frankly, we've all had days where like we show up and we're like, oh, I don't want to get shot in the face right now. But you need to be that guy who gets up and goes, because that's what shows the player who's like bunkered down that no, you can get up and you can shoot while you're moving and you can put fire down and be effective and push forward.
Yeah.
Right.
And that also applies in reverse too. Like there are certain things on the field that you would prefer to do because it's a bit more fun. So for example, on some of our fields, there are elevated structures, like which we call the sniper tower or whatever. And you can get up there, and if your gun has pretty good range, you can really lay a lot of hate down onto certain fields. And it's pretty well protected, so it's kind of fun to be up there and just start hosing right from the top of that tower. Well, if you're working with a group of people and you and the other person that you're working with have similar rifles and similar range and stuff, and the other guy wants to go, let him go, right? Or encourage them to go, because you know how fun it is to be up there. Get them to go and have a bit more fun while you sort of do the boots on the ground thing and, kick in the door or whatever, right? And it's on the one hand, like Pat was saying, and I think it's very, very hard to overstate this, but you really need to be willing to do the jobs that suck first. And also simultaneously, if there are jobs that are good or more fun or more, engaging, get other people to do them instead of you. And that will help them have a better experience overall. And eventually they'll associate that experience with having played with you. And that's going to be stuff they want to do more of.
And it gives you practice at figuring out what people are going to be effective at doing and good at doing, right? So if you look at your 4 guys and you go, oh, that guy's got a longer rifle, it's probably got slightly better range, we have access to an elevated position, we'll put him there to make use of that, then you're showing good decision-making skills, which means people are going to find it easier to respect your plans in the future. Mm-hmm. You're putting him in a position that he probably wants to be in, because most people who show up with, a gigantic sniper rifle-esque airsoft gun do want to be sort of backline, long-range fire kind of thing.
Yep.
So you're putting them into the position they want to play in. You're gaining Overwatch and fire support for yourself, which is valuable. And, it leaves you kind of in that, like, well, I guess I'm going to be the door kicker and the guy running up position, which is, in my, in fairness, like, I find it a fun position to be in. I don't have any problem with that. But, like, it's definitely the highest risk position.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
No question.
Guy in front gets shot first. Phil, walking behind guy in front, is safe because Pat is large.
Yeah. So this segues neatly into our final point, which is, okay, so you've been playing for a while with someone. How do you start your own team? And this seems kind of like a bit of a no-brainer. It's just you decide with someone else that you want to start a team. But it's a bit more complicated than that if you want to create a really cohesive working group, right? Working group of players. So naturally, if you've been playing with the same person for a while, you will get accustomed to their playstyle and you will therefore be a more effective fighting unit, let's call it. And forming a team is just basically putting a name on something that already exists.
And if you're going to go, well, I want to say we're a team, right? Ultimately what that, is going to come down to is one of 2 things. Either you're a team in the sense that, hey, when we both show up together, we play together. Or you're starting to ask questions about whether or not, or you should be starting to ask questions about whether or not Airsoft is a team sport, right? And the answer for our guys is yes, absolutely, and it's this weird thing where, we thankfully, I think, have guys coming to our team who have played team sports, who have played hockey competitively, you know, locally. And so when they look at this and go, yeah, well, we're a team, like, shouldn't we be having practice? Phil and I, who haven't really done that before, go, oh, that's a really good idea. We should have practice, you know? And at the time it was sort of like, oh, we really should have thought of that. But now it's like, yeah, of course we have practice, you know? And it's not like, oh, you know, we mandatory team practice every week, because we're not that hardcore. But, you know, we try to get together and practice every month, you know, just because a couple hours of doing ready ups and a couple hours of like moving fire drills and critiquing what we're doing and trying to work to improve our personal skills with 3 or 4 other guys, you know, looking at you and going, hey, you're doing this wrong, tweak it, is really, really helpful, you know. And then we go have a burger, because that also is part of team building, right? So there's sort of a playing on the field team stuff. And then there is, well, we're going to do some team stuff that's not part of the act of playing Airsoft, but that helps make us better at playing Airsoft, either because camaraderie and like personable relationships are good for working together as a team, or because so is literally doing, you know, moving fire drills and, you know, cover drills and stuff, just to make us all A, better, and B, less likely to wander off on the guy or couple of guys we're paired with during a game.
Yeah. And, you know, it's also interesting because you mentioned this pretty early on, but like even before you get to that stage, you need to make sure that the people that you are surrounding yourself with on your team share a lot of the same sort of values and, for lack of a better term, work ethic or gaming ethic than you do, right? So if we were to have a group of people who, for example, are like, I'm not interested in practicing ever. Like, I never want to get together outside of Airsoft to do ready ups. Like, that's not interesting to me. Well, that wouldn't be a really good fit for our team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because that's not what we're about. Simultaneously, if we had someone come to the team, it's like, okay, well, what's your rank structure? Right? Who's your sergeant? Who's your lance corporal? Right? Who's your, you know, who are the privates on the team? Like, we don't roll that way. Like, that's not interesting to us at all either. So when you're looking for people to join your team, you really need to make sure that those people are aligned with the types of people who you want to be working with, right? And rolling with on the field.
Yeah, it's a matter of sort of matching how your team wants to play Airsoft so that you have a bunch of people who have the same ideas about how to play Airsoft, you know? And we've had people like come to us and be like, oh man, I'm interested in being on the team, who we thought were cool and who we, you know, who played with us a bunch, and we're like, you know, yeah, this guy's sort of on our team, who ultimately were like, look, you guys are cool, you know, but this like getting together every couple of weeks to practice and like what you guys want out of the team environment is not actually what I want out of that environment. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, for us, it was just like, man, you're a cool person, no hard feelings, you know, wicked, we'll play games with you. See you soon. Right. You know, but yeah, it's important to realize that, you know, sometimes you're going to have people interested in playing with you because you are a team and who don't work out. And it's really, I think, critical to let people go with no hard feelings in circumstances like that, because, you know, yeah, try it. Great. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't work, that's cool. Like, it doesn't mean you're a terrible person and I hate you forever. It just means that you're not a good fit for this specific weird thing that we're trying to do, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's doubly important because there are, you know, as a team, right, as a group, the way that one individual behaves reflects on the entire group as a whole. So to give one example, if you have one person on your team who is rude and arrogant, your team is rude and arrogant, right? If you have someone on your team who doesn't call their hits, your team doesn't call their hits, right? That is a perspective, and the perspective is reality. Even if 5 out of the 6 people on your team call their hits regularly, you have one guy who doesn't call their hits, your team has a hit calling problem. So you need to be very conscious that the people who you are inviting into your circle and who are going to represent your team are the kinds of people who you actually want representing your team.
Absolutely. Because, you know, your team, the whole group of you, is always going to be perceived as every single person is whoever the biggest jerk wearing a patch is, right? You know? Yeah. And so, like, one of the things that's important to us is that, yeah, if you're going to play Airsoft and you're going to be one of our teammates and you're going to wear a patch, you need to be of a like mindset to us, right? You need to be the kind of person who's honorable as a player and cares about sportsmanship and isn't going to be a dick for the most part.
Yeah, basically. That's the bottom line, right? And so in that respect, it's very important that you just not pick people just because they're good.
Ultimately, aside from the occasional player who has just really astronomical personal skills, and they do crop up, practice and like working together is what makes a skilled Airsoft player, right? Mm-hmm. The players on our team who are really skilled are largely skilled because they've put work into being so, but also because they put work into making everyone on our team better.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't count myself as among the Storm Riders with the highest personal skills. I know better. But I do know they've also gotten better because of teaching me stuff, and that I've gotten better, and that I've picked, seen things in their play and been like, hey man, you should change this. And they've been like, oh, that's a good idea. The fact that I'm not as good as Chris or Cal, in practical terms, doesn't mean I'm a bad player. It doesn't mean that I'm a detriment to them when we're paired as a fire team. It might mean that Chris should perhaps be on point.
Yeah, maybe.
But Chris and I, who work together well and know each other well, are vastly more dangerous to an opposing team than either of us alone.
Yeah.
And that's the point, right? Like, the reason you want to be on a team in terms of gameplay is, a fire team of 2 or 3 or 4 guys is substantially more effective than its individual moving parts.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the day, like if you're, listening to this and you're like, hey, so how am I going to start an Airsoft team? I don't have any friends who play Airsoft. How do I start an Airsoft team? Well, the first step is you're going to get to know players and you're going to play with them on the field. You're going to listen to their ideas. You're going to try stuff out. You're going to be the first one in the door, even when you don't want to be. And you're going to build a reputation for yourself as just a solid player. Whether you're the best player or not, doesn't matter. You're just the kind of player that people want to play with, right? And once that happens, you can then say, hey, you know what? Like, we've been playing together for a while. I'd like to just formalize this. And why don't we come up with a team name? And by the way, that should be a group exercise. Like, I didn't say, hey, Pat, we're the Storm Riders now. Like, we sort of sat down and we're like, what are some cool names, right? How could we do this, right? And, we had a friend of ours help with, come up with our logo and all this kind of stuff. And it was a group effort because ultimately it would be a patch that we would want to wear and represent us as a team, right?
And, we worked stuff into it, like when we were talking about like, oh man, like what do we want to call the team? It was nerdy, and it was like, we're big metalheads and we're from a place in the middle of the North Atlantic known for, storms and for just boisterous piratey people and stuff. So we wanted to have some Newfoundland in there, right? Because we are Newfoundlanders and we're proud of it. So it's got to be a team effort to name your team, right? Like, that makes sense to me. Should hopefully make sense to you guys.
Yeah.
And yeah, it should be fun, right? But yeah, I ultimately think the first step in, having some friends who play Airsoft, if you don't have friends right now who want to try it, is go find some Airsofters and make friends with them.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And like, as sort of, flippant as that might sound, like, it really is the goal, is be the kind of player people want to have on their team, be the kind of player people want to be friends with, and it will work out for you pretty well, and it's going to be much more enjoyable than playing by yourself, in my opinion. Obviously there are people who play solo and who love it and who prefer it. That's cool. Probably this episode of the podcast wasn't as interesting to you guys as some of our other ones might be.
They're not the ones asking us these questions.
Yeah, exactly, right? But, and yeah, don't be afraid to be the guy who is in front and gets shot and who laughs the loudest and who has, a lot of fun, and be obvious about having fun, right? This is a hobby. It's a sport. It's a thing we do for enjoyment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I couldn't have said it better, right? Like, be the player who you would want to team up with. And if you do that, then the rest of it will flow pretty naturally, right? Once either you get invited to a team of players who you share common interests with and who you work well together, or you decide that you want to create your own unit, right? With people who share those same interests as you do. either way, I mean, it's not really possible to be too friendly, and you will never be poorly served by being outgoing and friendly to people and just being easy to get along with, affable, and like Pat said very succinctly, being the kind of player who you want to team up with. So that's it for us this week. We hope you found this episode helpful. I know it can sometimes be daunting to think about creating all these new friendships, but stick to it. It's definitely worth it. As I can say about the Storm Riders, I mean, these are guys who I am just so fortunate to know and have the opportunity to play with. And it's purely because we decided one day to get together back in 2009 and say, let's form a team and let's play together and see what happens. And here we are, 12 years later. 12 years? Yeah, 12 years.
12 years.
Wow.
12 years.
12 years later, talking to other people about how you can start your own team.
Yeah, guys, thanks as always for tuning in. And, if you have any questions about this or about anything else, feel free to toss them at us on Discord or on YouTube, wherever you're listening. Either way, have a great week.
Yep. See you, everyone.